St. Petersburg, Russia. The air tastes like damp autumn leaves and old server dust here. Late last fall, Alex felt it. The gnawing weight of spreadsheets and hiring disputes pressing down on his thriving enterprise. 8 years. Enough time for the initial fever pitch to settle into a grinding routine. The core of his business isn't sleek SaaS or viral marketing. It is pure mathematical grit. He reverse engineered the very algorithms, those hidden pseudo-random number generators, that dictate when a slot machine decides to cough up cash. And this knowledge is the blueprint for every successful wager across the organization. St. Petersburg, Russia. A late autumn chill clings to the granite facades, and inside a thriving office, Alex feels the weight of 8 years pressing down on him like stale paperwork. He watches his successful firm hum, the payroll deadlines ticking, the hiring calls ringing relentlessly, but all he craves is the quiet communion with lines of code. He's tired of being a CEO, he needs to be an architect again. Casinos across Poland, Macau, and Peru are the battlefield for this digital war. His field agents roam these sprawling halls, their phones recording machines that spit out fortune. But Alex holds the secret weapon, his ability to crack the pseudo-random number generators, those invisible algorithms that dictate when a slot machine decides to bless a player with cash. The problem, however, was far more complicated than a simple software bug. Alex's enterprise wasn't selling subscriptions. It was built on surgically dissecting the very DNA of slot machines, the pseudo-random number generators, or PRNGs, that dictate when the digital reels will grant riches. This intimate knowledge allows him to see the pattern before it happens, predicting the precise moment a machine is statistically inclined to cough up a big payout. St. Petersburg hums with data flow. An agent in Macau captures video of a vulnerable slot. This footage streams across continents, landing on Alex's desk like evidence in a high-stakes digital trial. His team doesn't just watch the reels spin, they analyze the underlying code fluctuations to find that millisecond where the house's odds briefly falter. Who is watching these transactions? They send timing data via custom app, causing agents' phones to vibrate with an almost imperceptible buzz, a silent cue commanding them to press spin. From the sterile office walls of St. Petersburg, the verdict is being rendered. Alex and his team are not guessing. They are calculating probabilities down to the millisecond. They transmit raw footage, a glittering cascade of flashing lights on a machine in some distant casino, and through intense analysis, they pinpoint the exact moment the odds briefly stutter against the house. This timing data, relayed via a custom application vibrating silently on an agent's phone, is the precise trigger that allows his operatives to seize the edge before it vanishes into the digital ether. Goulburn, New South Wales. The team's methodology proves brutally effective. 4 agents operating in concert can pull down more than $250,000 within a single week. But Alex sees himself as something grander than just a moneymaker. He is an insurgent Robin Hood, fighting the avarice of the global gambling machine. Still, even this perceived righteousness doesn't grant him immunity when American prosecutors look at his milking system, a clever defiance, and label it plain fraud. Evidenced by federal indictments against his agents in Missouri, Illinois, and California. St. Petersburg, Russia. Alex doesn't see himself as a mere thief. He sees himself as an economic correction factor. He views the casino industry not as providers of fleeting joy, but as relentless money vacuums. And his own digital arbitrage, his milking system, is merely a necessary counterweight to that global tide. Yet, even in the gleaming infrastructure of Russian cybervigilance, he knows the wolves are circling. A mere technical operation can swiftly morph into federal fraud, as 4 of his agents already proved in American courts. Melbourne, Victoria. Desperate for one final monumental score before pulling the plug on his enterprise, Alex turns his gaze toward Aristocrat Leisure, the Australian titan behind slot machines like 50 Lions. He doesn't just offer services, he issues a calculated ultimatum, detailing how his agents can halt further trademark compromise and eliminate systemic flaws in their prize games. But beneath the veneer of altruism, the true currency being exchanged is far higher. Alex intends to extract maximum money from his developments. Melbourne, Victoria. The silence of the server room presses down like humidity, thick and smelling faintly of ozone and old coffee. Alex, nursing a lukewarm cup, hunches over his terminal, staring at the glowing green lines of code that represent months of obsessive analysis, the final push before retirement. He sends the email into the corporate ether, a calculated offering to Aristocrat Leisure, their global titan of slot machines, suggesting he could stop them from compromising their brand. Chapter 1. The calm facade cracks open. Global headquarters, London, implied. Tracy Elkerton reads the message on her screen and the calm facade cracks. She sees not just a pitch, but thinly veiled leverage. Alex hasn't named his price, yet merely hinted that he intends to extract maximum money, but then he raises the stakes. Ignore him and these secrets, the weaknesses of 50 Lions. A flaw in Heart of Gold could bleed out onto the internet for rivals to feast upon. Global headquarters, London. The silence in the office is suddenly fractured by a harsh digital ping. On the glowing monitor, Alex's final line hangs there. The matter could become worse if technical details would be available for your competitors or will be shared via internet or media. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an ultimatum delivered with the cold precision of calculated entropy. Queen Square, Sydney, where Elkerton is now responding. A flicker of unease crosses her face as she processes his threat. But Alex doesn't stop there. He seals his warning with a devastating document, a mathematical proof, a paper monument to pure logic, dissecting the very PRNG that drives Aristocrat's flagship games like 50 lines. Is this just leverage, or is he demanding something far more substantial than a simple conversation? Elkerton felt a prickle of apprehension beneath the polished veneer of Queen Square. She typed back to him, suggesting neutral ground in the United States, a place where neither his operation nor Aristocrat could claim absolute dominion. The goal, she specified, understanding the exact mechanics of the cash-out anomaly plaguing their slot machines across international borders. Alex stared at the screen from wherever he was hiding, a silent fury simmering beneath the surface of his carefully crafted reply. Crossing that border felt like walking onto a live wire. American soil meant potential arrests. Frustrated by what tasted like deliberate stalling tactics from Aristocrat's side, he decided to show her exactly how much wreckage he could unleash on her corporate empire. His passport felt like a ticking bomb in his pocket. Stepping foot on US soil meant inviting scrutiny, perhaps even handcuffs. Frustration burned hot within him as Aristocrat seemed to deliberately slow the gears of this massive enterprise. He decided then and there that he needed to make Elkerton understand the depth of the chaos he could unleash upon her employer. February arrived, and that's when the correspondence began after Alex read my piece detailing his agent's exploits across America. I keep an eye on what becomes public regarding my business, he typed back, a calculated calm settling over the words. But before even that, his name had already been whispered, once by someone deep inside the Eastern District of Missouri fraud investigation. And again to Willie Allison, a man who has tracked the St. Petersburg operation for years. Chapter 2, Digital Thread tightens further. The digital thread connecting us tightened in February. After I detailed his operations in the States, the subtle victories orchestrated by his operatives, Alex admitted to a guarded vigilance. I keep an eye on what becomes public regarding my business. He wasn't merely watching, he was cataloging every tremor, every rumor swirling around his name. Miami, Florida. That's where Willie Allison, a seasoned casino security consultant with decades tracking the St. Petersburg organization, had mentioned him. Yet the whispers also reached deeper into Missouri, within the grim corridors of the Eastern District fraud investigation. Who else knows this man? Is he merely an architect of schemes, or does he command something far more clandestine than just bank accounts? A quiet agreement settled between us, a truce drawn in plain text. He would speak on record, but under veil, his surname erased like graffiti from brickwork. Yet, to prove his truth, he offered weapons. Encrypted emails, cold mathematical proofs laid out like evidence at a crime scene, and audio clips that seemed to hold the very breath of the high-stakes rooms. St. Petersburg, Russia. This was where the legend claims it began. He claims education in math and programming at some elite Russian fortress, followed by 2 formative years inside the FSB Academy, a crucible designed to forge spies. Who is watching this account? Because when he speaks of his early life, a man utterly uninterested in the flashing lights, he says gambling was merely taxation on stupidity. St. Petersburg, Russia. The sterile halls of a top university echo with the sharp click of mechanical keyboards. Alex claims he mastered mathematics and code within those walls. Following that academic foundation, he alleges a deeper immersion into statecraft, spending 2 years at the FSB Academy, a crucible for intelligence operatives. Who builds the perfect machine to trick the system? And what drove this brilliant mind away from abstract theorems toward flashing lights? Somewhere near his formative years, slot machines were not a temptation, they were an insult. Alex states he saw gambling as nothing more than taxation on stupidity, but that attitude shifted a decade ago while working as a freelance hacker. This cynicism fractured when a Russian casino hired him, tasking him with tweaking Novomatic machines from Austria, lowering the generous 90% payout down to a merciless 50%. A cramped server room hums with the synthetic breath of servers, the air thick with ozone and stale coffee. In this digital cathedral sits a Novomatic machine, its polished chrome reflecting a harsh fluorescent glare. A Russian casino boss demands the odds be tightened. The programmed 90% payout feels too generous to his ledger, too forgiving to his bottom line. Chapter 3, Encountering Engineered Chance. Somewhere in that humming expanse of code, Alex encounters it, the pseudo-random number generator, an elegant algorithm spitting forth endless streams of improbable wins and losses. This isn't chaos. This is mathematics disguised as fate, driven by a single starting point, a seed and mutated by invisible inputs like the tick of a machine's internal clock. Berlin, Germany. A low, persistent hum vibrates through the server racks, the sound of pure engineered chance. Amidst this digital thrumming, he finds it, the PRNG. It's a mathematical Ouroboros spitting out sequences so perfectly random they mimic the decay of atomic matter itself. The system doesn't just guess, it calculates defiance. Auburn, New South Wales, though Alex moved beyond these borders. After the casino floor gave up its secrets, Alex immersed himself for 6 long months, turning obsession into expertise. He wasn't just learning the language of the algorithm, he was feeling it, a mathematical cadence thrumming in his veins, confidence so absolute it felt almost arrogant. Who is watching this code? The answer came when he unleashed that mastery onto Eastern European Novomatic machines. 6 months. 6 months spent staring at glowing terminals until the lines of code blurred into a single pulsing stream. He didn't just study pseudo-random number generators, he absorbed them, mastering their chaotic elegance to a degree that felt less like knowledge and more like an involuntary bodily function. Alex now feels those numbers in his bloodstream. He doesn't just read them, he knows how they will move before the machine even whirs into life. Moscow, Russia. When the massive economic tide shifted and the industry began its brutal sell-off after state decree, opportunity arrived like a wrecking ball against the established order. Alex seized it, snagging an aristocrat Mark Visag cabinet, a paper monument to predictable chance, and started stripping away its protective layers, reverse engineering the algorithms that governed over 100 zero-ubiquitous machines worldwide. Eastern Europe's neon glow bled across the polished marble floors of Novomatic casinos in 2008. Alex deployed his small army then, a specialized crew tasked with meticulously milking the digital veins of those slot machines until they groaned under the weight of their own programmed generosity. 3 years later, that predatory efficiency caught up to the manufacturer itself. Novomatic was forced to issue a stark warning, admitting some of its very random number generators. The heart of the illusion had been compromised by outside forces. Missouri's casino halls in 2014 became a prime hunting ground for his perfected technique. After navigating the fallout from Russia's industry collapse, Alex had secured an aristocrat Mark VI cabinet, and he reverse-engineered its digital soul. Now, agents across the globe, guided by his bespoke app, targeted these ubiquitous machines, and every single count in that indictment pointed directly to a skillfully exploited Mark VI unit. Chapter 4, Beyond Degrees or Pedigree. A dimly lit Zoom call flickers, casting harsh shadows across Alex's face. He doesn't care about the degrees or the corner office pedigree of the applicants flooding his digital inbox. Instead, he watches their eyes, the flicker of calculated reserve, the practiced neutrality for a single metric: discretion. Orlando, Florida. The 2-hour training session feels less like instruction and more like an inoculation against detection. Candidates learn to trust the bespoke phone app, that tiny screen beacon, which vibrates precisely when it's time to slap down the spin button on the slot machine. Orlando, Florida. Beneath the fluorescent hum of the training room, Alex doesn't just look for skill, he vets a deeper quality: discretion. He demands that his operatives understand the art of the quiet maneuver, ensuring their very presence in the casino feels respectable enough to deflect casual suspicion, a silent pact before the first chip is played. St. Petersburg, Russia. The organization has seen its secrets tested by the law more than once. Arrests are rare because the milking system cleverly skirts outright illegality across several jurisdictions. Yet when those walls close in, informants crack open like cheap porcelain, revealing how these agents conceal their recording devices behind mesh shirt pockets and ensuring 90% of every haul funnels straight back to the motherlode. Missouri, USA. When the enforcers finally make contact with casino security, the heavy hands of the establishment, they aren't always taken down in a blaze of glory. More often, they are simply stripped bare, their winnings confiscated like evidence, and their names blacklisted from every velvet-roped floor. Yet Alex has managed to absorb these legal blows, weathering them until one by one, his carefully guarded secrets begin to leak into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Singapore. The veneer cracks further in 2016. A Czech operative, facing the charge alongside 2 Russian counterparts under that stringent Casino Control Act, decides to trade silence for a lesser penalty. He opens up, and with him comes the blueprint. Agents slipping phones discreetly behind mesh shirt pockets, a precise mechanism of how they don't spook the slot machines into glitching. This cooperation forces the confession of their financial allegiance 90% of the house takes back home to St. Petersburg. Missouri. The handcuffs click with a sharp metallic finality against polished steel cuffs. One Kazakh national, unwilling to stand alone against 3 Russian compatriots, chooses to speak. His testimony offers the FBI a sliver of grace, a reduced sentence in exchange for truth. Auburn, New South Wales. But the story doesn't stop at cooperation. Just before the lights dim for Australia's Christmas break, Tracy Elkerton receives a call that smells faintly of strong Russian cologne and sharp ambition. Chapter 5, Christmas break looming large. Colburn, New South Wales. As the holiday season approached, a quiet anticipation hung in the air around Tracy Elkerton and Aristocrat. Christmas break was looming, and with it, a pause in the relentless cycle of exploitation. The phone rings, a sharp, insistent chime cutting through the usual hum of corporate activity. From this call arrives Peter, an intermediary speaking on behalf of Alex, whose presence feels suddenly weighty against the backdrop of impending shutdown. Queen Square, Sydney. The initial contact is disarming. Peter introduces himself in a lightly accented English, subtly signaling his role as translator for the Russian architect of the problem, or perhaps its solution. He plants the seed of intrigue by explicitly stating that he is recording the call, a silent declaration of war against obfuscation. What begins as a nervous deflection by Elkerton quickly blossoms. She tries to retreat to her next meeting, but Peter's smooth cadence persuades her to stay put, allowing Alex's intent to finally breach the polite defenses. Queen Square, Sydney. A single phone rings across the polished expanse of Aristocrat's headquarters just as the city prepares to settle into the muted glow of its Christmas downtime. An unexpected voice breaks through the ambient hum, Peter smooth and carrying the faint resonance of an Eastern European accent. He doesn't ask permission. He simply informs Tracy Elkerton that he is calling on behalf of a phantom named Alex, all while his hidden recording device captures every nervous intake of breath. Queen Square, Sydney. Initially, Tracy sounds like she's bracing for bad news, a seasoned executive trying to terminate the conversation before it can contaminate her meticulous schedule. Peter possesses an unnerving patience. He cajoles her, weaving carefully around her polite resistance until the half-hour mark approaches. Is this man offering salvation or just another gilded cage? Elkerton sounds initially flustered by the situation, her voice tight over the connection line as if she were fielding a surprise audit mid-strategy session. She tries to cut the conversation short, citing an impending meeting, a tangible deadline pulling her toward exit, but Peter is a relentless conversational architect. He cajoles her into staying just long enough for Alex's message to land. Queen Square, Sydney. As the 30 minutes tick by like sand through an hourglass, Elkerton's defensiveness begins to erode, replaced by something sharper, professional steel. It is very unlikely that Aristocrat will pay for information, she states, her skepticism ringing clear enough to cut through the ambient city hum of Queen Street, yet Peter immediately counters, dropping a seismic claim about their newly cracked PRNGs on the Helix machines. Chapter 6. It is not just a flaw. Elkerton leans back in her leather chair at Aristocrat headquarters, the polished mahogany desk reflecting the sterile overhead lights onto its surface. It is very unlikely that Aristocrat will pay for information, she states, the certainty in her voice a finely tuned defense mechanism against suspicion. Though Peter pushes back, shaking off the doubt with a decisive flick of his wrist, suggesting the problem is far larger than mere data theft. Elkerton pauses, the practiced skepticism momentarily dissolving as he introduces a new variable. Alex claims to have cracked the pseudo-random number generators, the digital brains of the Helix slot machines. This isn't just an alleged vulnerability, it's a surgical strike against 2 generations of game tech, potential catastrophe hidden within shiny metal casings. Elkerton allows a fraction of doubt to crack her polished facade. Peter watches the flicker in her eyes, the tiny admission that perhaps this extortionist is not just bluffing. He pushes back, asserting that Aristocrat may be dangerously underestimating the sheer number of vulnerable Helix machines already running loose across casinos nationwide. Queen Square, Sydney. Alex then drops the bomb. It isn't just a hunch, it's a hard-won certainty. He claims he has cracked the very algorithms governing those games, the pseudo-random number generators, PRNGs, for the latest generation of Aristocrat slot hardware, 2 generations beyond their Mark V-psych behemoths. Elkerton does not dismiss the specter of cheating outright. Instead, she allows the possibility to breathe in the sterile air of the conference room, a theoretical poison seeping into their meticulously engineered machine. The Helix cabinets themselves, the digital monuments to Aristocrat's fortune-making prowess, might not yet hold the flaw Alex has pinpointed. They lack the specific solution that they have implemented. Queen Square, Sydney. Sensing the sudden shift in power dynamics, the pivot from defense to offense, Alex immediately tightens his grip. He instructs Peter, demand this proposal be hurled into the lap of Aristocrat's most senior decision makers, because he knows they will finally believe the threat when their core product is placed squarely in jeopardy. Queen Square, Sydney. The line crackles with tension, a high-pitched whine against the backdrop of hushed boardroom air. Alex leans into his microphone, sensing the moment has shifted. He instructs Peter to push for more than just approval, demanding that Aristocrat's most senior architects see his pitch, knowing their proprietary helixes hang in the balance. Elkerton, ever the meticulous gatekeeper, counters with a practiced caution, citing not only Aristocrat's stated devotion to being truly ethical, but also the nagging doubt planted in her own mind. Will Alex honor his word? He asks directly why, after years of milking that system for fortunes, he craves an exit, a guarantee against becoming criminally entangled with illegal operations. Chapter 7. Elkerton leaned back. Elkerton leaned back, the polished wood of his office chair creaking beneath him like an old ship groaning against the high tide. Why? He pressed the word hanging in the air between them like static electricity. After years of milking millions through your agents globally, are you suddenly willing to settle for a deal with Aristocrat? The real reason Peter finally admitted was fear, a cold creeping dread that his perfect little empire might be built on illegal sand. Queen Square, Sydney. 3 weeks melted into the waiting silence before Alex struck. He didn't simply reply. He deployed an 8-figure declaration via email, mapping out every precise service he could offer in exchange for a massive payout. If Aristocrat continued its agonizing hesitation, he warned, his tone shifting from pleading to predatory certainty, that he would leak his vulnerabilities to their rivals, a calculated threat designed to force the hand of the giants. Alex waited 3 weeks in a pressurized vacuum of expectation, watching his inbox like a hawk tracking prey. Then, he fired off an email to Elkerton, a digital grenade packed with threat and promise. This wasn't just asking for a favor. It was presenting a comprehensive business proposal where the exchange rate tipped heavily toward him, some approaching 8 figures in return for unlocking Aristocrat's secrets. Goulburn, New South Wales. In that email, Alex didn't just threaten inaction. He detailed his contingency plan, a digital scorched earth policy should they delay. He promised to leak his vulnerability data directly to their rivals, effectively handing competitors the keys to secure their own machines while simultaneously setting up a raid on Aristocrat's customer base. Goulburn, New South Wales. The proof arrived like a surgical strike, a complex mathematical dissection of the pseudo-random number generator governing the 50 Dragon slot on the Helix machines. Alongside the equations, there was photographic evidence. A stark image of a specific Helix unit allegedly sitting within the cavernous sprawl of the Sands Macau casino. Alex wasn't just waving threats, he demanded verification from Aristocrat's engineers, forcing them to look beyond the smoke and into the raw data logs. Queen Square, Sydney. When Aristocrat finally responded to inquiries regarding this purported cheat, their language was carefully calibrated, a tightrope walk between denial and unease. They admitted receiving information alleging to be proof, yet they claimed no tangible evidence of a cheat could be verified against their own standards. But the way they framed it, assuring reporters that only the handful of vintage Mark VI titles were confirmed suspects, suggests something else entirely. Who is watching this account? Headquarters, Melbourne. The words arrive in a sterile, meticulously crafted statement. Aristocrat received information, could not verify any cheat. It sounds like corporate boilerplate designed to manage expectations. Yet the firm reiterates that its only acknowledged failures are confined to handful of Mark VI vintage titles, leaving Alex's alleged proof hanging in the air like an unconfirmed accusation. They urge customers toward new products. Subtle directive. Buy more, because this old tech is failing beneath their polished facade. Chapter 8. Steeping in the data pool. University of New Mexico. After sharing his latest data packet, the silence stretched thin, taut as a pulled wire waiting for a snap. David Ackley, steeped in the cold logic of computer science, began tracing the algorithm's strange DNA. Converting hexadecimal strings to familiar decimal figures, 3415926, 27826, 278, and that suggestive 69069 was not coincidence, it was a signature. Who is writing this code? Queen Square, Sydney. A formal confirmation flickers across a screen, a deadpan declaration from Aristocrat. They have confirmed this extortion attempt. The company spokesman offers no solace. Just rigid protocol, a wall of corporate certainty built to deflect suspicion, though their swift response suggests the threat is far more than idle noise who is watching this account. They are clearly listening. University of New Mexico. David Ackley stares at Alex's latest proof, a cascade of hexadecimal digits that seems like meaningless static code. But then the hunch strikes, he converts the raw data points to decimal, and suddenly the numbers breathe. 3143926, pi perfectly rendered, 278028, the relentless march of A, on a sly 69069, a coded little grin. The hex code glowed faintly on the monitor screen, a silent language spoken in ones and zeros when David Ackley spotted it. He took the cryptic sequence, the engine's very DNA written out in base 16, and translated it into the familiar, comforting vernacular of decimal. Suddenly, chaos coalesced into pattern. 3450926, the endless whisper of pi. 271828, a stubborn ghost of Iala's, and then 669, a brazen mathematical wink. Goulburn, New South Wales. That numerical triad didn't just appear, it had history. Tracing those cheeky markers backwards pulled us into the digital ether to space out, that glittering Starfield simulation from 1988. The original programmer recalled borrowing his randomness seed from a dusty tome, Donald Knuth's The Art of Computer Programming, a book whose logic has stood unshaken for decades. Goulburn, New South Wales. The sequence, those precise numbers Alex provided, didn't stop at the edge of his proof, they traveled backward in time. A digital phantom limb leading him to space out a 1988 program that rendered a dizzying starfield across the X Windows system screen. Queen Square, Sydney. This numerical signature had been borrowed from another machine, a master algorithm cribbed long ago from Donald Knuth's monumental text, The Art of Computer Programming. But who was smarter? Was Alex planting an inside joke for Aristocrat's engineers to stumble upon? Or had the giant corporation been unknowingly playing by a 36-year-old rulebook all along? Chapter 9: Calculated Taunt Within Code. The first possibility is a calculated taunt. Alex, the architect of this digital disruption, didn't just find a flaw. He crafted a message within it, a series of mathematical in-jokes designed to needle Aristocrat's very engineers. He wagered that these titans of slot design would be too dense, too steeped in their own proprietary brilliance to see him putting them on the spot. Queen Square, Sydney. The second possibility hangs heavy in the air. Aristocrat might not be failing, it might just be inheriting a legacy. Those random number generators, those digital dice that dictate fortune and ruin for millions, are partly built upon an algorithm as ancient as 36 years. Can the company truly defend itself by pointing to this historical bedrock? Queen Square, Sydney. A company spokesperson offered a shield against the accusations, asserting that every single Aristocrat game gracing a casino floor has been vetted and officially approved by the relevant government regulators. This certification, they claimed, provided an automatic defense, suggesting any code flaw Alex discovered was merely a failure of bureaucracy, not necessarily genius on his part. But even with regulatory rubber stamping in place, could that seal truly protect them from scrutiny? Queen Square, Sydney. Despite this built-in immunity, Aristocrat held firm against Alex's demands for negotiation, refusing to bend to the pressure, a stance many of their corporate rivals have already yielded to. Steve Stone, an advisor at IBM's X-Force, warns that while paying off a ransom might seem like a manageable cost compared to litigation, Black Hat hackers rarely accept a single settlement. He cautions that once you open your vault for one demand, they are invariably waiting with the next, perhaps even the third. Queen Square, Sydney. Even as his phone vibrated with unanswered calls, Alex knew the deadlock wasn't just a negotiation tactic, it was a statement of corporate defiance. His rivals, other titans of the slot machine world, had capitulated already, feeding their Black Hat tormentor Bitcoin to settle the ticking time bomb of reputation damage. But Aristocrat, they held fast. Brooklyn, New York. Alex wasn't waiting for them to cave, he was preparing his next strike, eyeing IGT like a predator circling prey. He claimed he cracked the PRNGs, the very digital DNA of games manufactured by Atronic, an Austrian entity now owned by the behemoth. Who is watching this account? A sophisticated engineer's mind, Alex asserted, sees only linearity. They fail to grasp the psychology required to dismantle a system entirely. Brooklyn, New York. He isn't done with the machines yet. After the standoff with Aristocrat proved fruitless, Alex turns his sights toward IGT, another titan in the slot manufacturing realm. He confidently asserts that his decryption work on Atronic, an Austrian firm now under IGT's wing, is superior. He claims that PRNGs are a bit more robust. Yet even those boast vulnerabilities an engineer's mind can exploit. The game is no longer just theory, though. A crew of 33 alleged mobsters, the Shulaya Enterprise, reportedly a blend of Russian and Georgian power, acquired one of his milking systems in September 2016. These men brought the device to a Brooklyn apartment, 4 months later deploying it across Pennsylvania casinos. They weren't just playing the game, they were rewriting the odds by using software designed to predict specific machine behavior. A damp, stale apartment in Brooklyn, New York, September 2016. That's where the hardware arrived. An Aristocrat marked this like slot machine, blinking its promise of digital riches onto a worn laminate countertop. This was just the opening act for the Shulaya Enterprise. 4 months later, a single piece of machinery became the focal point of a systematic heist against Pennsylvania casinos. The Enterprise didn't rely on brute force alone. They employed proprietary intelligence. They utilized specialized electronic devices and software, a digital scalpel owned to predict machine behavior, to drain slot after slot dry. If Alex walks away from this racket, his vision is even grander. He envisions a zombie apocalypse where any smartphone can hijack these vulnerable machines, transforming them into gaudy, unpredictable ATMs overnight. Dust motes dances in the harsh fluorescent